Hello and good day, everyone. So our lesson objectives for today are the following. Let us see. We have the following. Okay. Illustrate the domain and range of the inverse trigonometric functions. Evaluate an inverse trigonometric expression and solve trigonometric equations. Okay, so ano nga ba yung inverse trigonometric functions? So let me introduce them to you. But first, did you know that inverse trigonometric functions commonly appear in calculus? Para ma-motivate tayo para pag-aralan yung inverse trigonometric functions. For example, you're given with this. Ayan. So, pag in-integrate daw natin itong equation na to, ang answer dyan is arctan of x. So, this is read as arctan of x. Medyo in-spoil ko na sa inyo. Arctan of x plus c. Okay, so ayan. So that is the inverse trigonometric function of the tangent function. So syempre prerequisite knowledge dito, yung kailangan alam na natin yung mga trigonometric functions, kilala na dapat natin si sine, cosine, tangent, cotangent, secant, cosecant function. So ano yung mga notations natin for inverse trig functions? We commonly denote an inverse trig function with an exponent of -1, just like yung ordinary inverse function natin sa algebra, no? So, for example, the inverse cosine is denoted as this one, parang cosine raised to -1. Pero it is important here to note that in this case, the -1 is not an exponent. Take note, it's not an exponent. Parang notation lang siya to denote the inverse function. So, that means yung ating arc cosine of x, so this is read as arc cosine of x, is not equal to the reciprocal of cosine. So, it's not equal to 1 over cosine x. Okay, let me get my pen. Okay, so while it's true that cosine squared x, if you remember, di ba, we had our cosine squared x. We mentioned that this is equal to cosine x raised to the second power. In this case naman, we have cosine to the -1. Yan, that is actually our cosine, no? Not cosine to the -1. That is not equal to cosine x raised to -1. So that is not true for the case of -1. True lang yung ganitong pagsulat ng exponent or this equality if the exponent is a positive integer. Okay? Pero kapag ka negative integer, it's not the case na. Okay? So, yung 1 over cosine x, yan. Okay. So, yung ganito naman, if we are to insist na gusto natin itong 1 over cosine x, we will denote it this way. So, ito yung equal sa 1 over cosine of x. This portion, this expression on the right, siya yung equal sa 1 over cosine x, but this one, iba siya. Okay? That's the inverse trigo function for cosine. So, pakilala ko sa inyo yung arc sine x, arc cosine of x, arc tan x, arc cotangent x, arc secant of x, and arc cosecant x. Okay? So, those are the inverse trigonometric functions. And what do we mean by those? Okay? So, let's illustrate them with this example, no? So, sine 90 degrees is equal to 1. We know that sine 90 degrees is equal to 1, right? Nandito siya sa positive y-axis. This has coordinate 0, 1. Tapos, we know that the y-coordinate represents the sine corresponding to 90 degrees, sine value of 90 degrees. So, it's equal to 1. Pero, pag kinuha natin yung arc sine of 1, that will be equal to 90 degrees. Okay? Ayan. So, ibig sabihin yung pabaliktad. Parang ang in-input natin dito yung 90 degrees. And that results to a 1. Okay? Parang ganun yung pairing with the sine function. Okay? Now, with the arc sine function, pabaliktad. Ayan. Given the 1, ano yung arc sine? That will lead us to the theta. So, ang theta naman yung hinahanap natin or the angle that gives us a sine value equal to 1 and the answer is 90 degrees. Pero alam din natin that the sine of -270 degrees also equal to 1, correct? Diba? If we move on the clockwise direction from this point, Yan yung initial point natin is 1, 0. We, again, yung concept ng coterminal angles, no? Yung sine ng negative 270 degrees is also equal to 1. So that means yung arc sine of 1 can also be equal to negative 270 degrees. But then sabi dito 90 degrees pa rin siya. Sine of 450 degrees, again, we're using the concept of coterminal angles, is also equal to 1. Pero pag tinignan natin, kahit using our calculator, the arc sine of 1 will be displaying 90 degrees pa rin. Okay? Why is that? Kasi yung arc sine of x nililimit natin to certain values. No? So it's just limited to this range, negative 90 degrees to positive 90 degrees, which in terms of pi radians is negative pi over 2 to pi over 2. So illustrating those values, we have this. No? Ito yung ating Cartesian plane. Erase ko lang yung some portion. Okay. Ayun. So, bali lalabas. Meron ka ditong, ito yung values niya. From negative 90 degrees. Yan. Ay, sorry. From negative 90 degrees here to positive 90 degrees. Okay. Ayun. So, pag ganun yung movement natin. Okay. So, this will take care of the negative sign values. This will take care of the positive sign values. So, what about cosine 60 degrees? Alam natin, cosine 60 degrees is equal to 1/2. Pwedeng, we know that from our previous knowledge of special values. Pwede rin namang ginamitan natin ng calculator. That means our cosine of 1/2 is equal to 60 degrees. Yan. So, illustrating that, parang yung sa mapping na ginamit natin kanina, no? Meron kang 60 degrees dito, and then applying the cosine function, we arrive at 1/2. Now, we're given with the 1/2, applying the arc cosine. Yan. Though there are actually many angles that will give you equal value of cosine equal to 1/2, yan. Pag kinuha na natin yung arc cosine ng 1/2, 60 degrees pa rin ang ibibigay sa atin. So, alam natin, cosine of 300 degrees is also 1/2. Pero pag kinuha natin yung arc cosine ng 1/2, 60 degrees pa rin, katulad ng minention ko a while ago. Again, yung ating arc cosine naman, nalilimit natin to this range 0 to 180 degrees. Kasi otherwise, it will not be a function kung madaming possible values, di ba? Yung 1 is to many, it will no longer be a function. Dapat, kaya parang in-establish natin yung 1 is to 1. Okay? Okay lang yung many values na minamap natin to just one value, function pa rin siya. Pero yung one value map into several values, yung one to many, yun yung hindi nagiging function. Okay? So, kaya nililimit lang natin to this range, no? Yung ating values for our cosine will be from 0 to 180 degrees or from 0 to pi. So, sa ating diagram, we have this range or these values where this is 0. Yan, this is 180 degrees or pi. This will take care of the positive values of cosine. This will take care of the negative values for cosine. So, pag tangent of negative 45 degrees naman natin, alam natin that's equal to 1. Remember, these are just illustrative examples. So, pag kinuha natin yung arctan of negative 1, that is negative 45 degrees. Pero alam din natin the tangent of 135 degrees, this is located on the second quadrant. This is located on the fourth quadrant. That's why the tangent function for both of this, our tangent function values are negative. So arctan of negative 1, negative 45 degrees pa rin. So that means yung range ng ating tangent, arctan, nagre-range lang siya from negative 90 to positive 90, just like the arcsine function. Okay? Kaya lang, sa arcsine, included yung endpoints na negative 90 to positive 90. Okay? Dito, hindi kasali yung endpoints kasi remember, the tangent function is undefined for this endpoints negative 90 and positive 90. Nagiging undefined yung tangent doon. Okay? So, ang range natin, again, similar to the arcsine will be this, no? Kaya lang excluded yung endpoints. That's why strict inequality tayo. Okay? This is from negative 90 to positive 90. Again, this will take care of the positive values of tan. This will take care of the negative values of the tangent function. Similarly, if you have the arc cotangent, it will range from 0 to 180. Hindi pa rin kasali yung extreme values natin kasi magiging undefined yung cotangent for the 0 and 180. So sa arc secant, hindi kasali yung 90 kasi undefined siya for this, pero dito defined naman siya. Kaya safe tayo dun sa kabilang endpoint. Arc secant is from 0 to 90. Yan. Or pwede rin naman na 90 to 180. Okay? Kasi yung 90 yung ini-exclude natin. So parang diretso lang sana tayo halos, kaya lang i-skipan natin yung 90 degrees. Okay? Ayan. So parang ganito siya. So si arc cotangent is from 0 to 180. Okay? Tapos dito naman sa arc secant, so hindi kasali to, hindi kasali to. Sa arc secant naman, pag ganun, kaya lang hindi mo sasali to, ito kasali, tapos this one din kasali. Okay? Si arc cosecant naman, that's from negative 90 to 90, negative 90 to 90, parang di ba yung ka-reciprocal niya si sine function ni cosecant. So parang si arc cosecant kaparehas din ng arc sine, no? Kaya from negative 90 to positive 90 din. Kaya lang, hindi natin sasali yung 0 kasi undefined yung cosecant for that value. Okay? So, hindi kasali yung 0. Parang iskipan natin siya. Okay? Ayun. So, that's it for our range of the arc cotangent, arc secant, and arc cosecant. In summary, we have the following. Yan. So, ito yung mga notations natin. So, if y is equal to arc sine of x, that means x is equal to sine y. Yan. So, ang value natin for the x's, di ba, ang possible values ng sine function natin, only range from negative 1 to 1. Okay? Ganun din yung cosine, from negative 1 to 1 lang siya. Okay? Unlike yung tangent and cotangent, all real numbers. Whereas yung angles natin, yung angle natin dapat kapag ganito, no, all real numbers, no? Pero yung sine function tsaka cosine function values, nagre-range lang sa negative 1 to 1. Kaya kapag nakuha mong sine is, kunwari, sine of theta is equal to 2, mali na yun. O sine of theta is equal to 1.5, mali na rin yun. O di kaya cosine theta is negative 1.7, mali rin yun. Dapat yung sine and cosine only range from negative 1 to 1. So, ito yung mga range naman ng usual principal value. We call those the principal value yung kinukuha natin. Kasi sabi nga natin, aside from 90 degrees, pwede rin negative 270, 450. Pero we just take the principal value, whether it's in radians or in degrees. So, ito yung ating source. Ito yung pwede nating paghugutan ng mga values lang natin. Okay? Yung principal value lang yung kinukuha. Hindi na yung mga coterminal values. Okay? Unless otherwise specified in the problem. Okay, so you can take a screenshot of this for your added notes. So for example, let's determine the following. Let's have arctan of square root of 3. Okay, so arctan muna tayo ng square root of 3. So anong function yung meron tayo na tangent equal to square root of 3. So that means yung sine is square root of 3, cosine is 1/2. So that happens when you are when your theta is pi over 3 or 60 degrees. So that means this is equal to 60 degrees. Okay? Special value natin, di ba? Sine is, that means sine function. We're looking for the theta giving us a sine value equal to square root of 3 over 2 and cosine theta equal to 1/2. Okay, and that theta value, kasi para tangent theta is square root of 3. And that theta value is 60 degrees or pi over 3. Okay. Ayan, kasi ang hinahanap natin, the angle, the value of the angle or the principal value. What about when arc sine of negative 1/2? So, kailan nagiging negative 1/2 yung sine natin? So, That means parang ganito yan, no? Sin theta equals negative 1/2. Yan. So that happens when you are in quadrant 4, no? Or quadrant 3. Pero quadrant 4 yung ating source or quadrant 1 for the arcsine function. So negative 1/2. So dapat kung positive 1/2 to, it should have been 30 degrees. Pero dahil negative, kung positive 30 degrees, pero kung nasa negative ka, negative 30 degrees. Nasa fourth quadrant. Okay, negative 30 degrees or negative pi over 6. Okay, I hope you are following. Now, what about our cosine of negative square root of 2 over 2? You can check with your calculator the answer here. Kung negative square root of 2 over 2, remember the arc cosine is either on the first or second quadrant, diba? From 0 to 180 siya. This will take care of the negative values, okay? So, dapat 45 degrees ang gusto natin, pero yung counterpart niya sa second quadrant, diba? Nung 45 degrees is 135 degrees. So, the answer here is 135 degrees or counterpart 3 pi over 4. Nasa second quadrant po yan. Okay? Kasi arc cosine is either on the first or second quadrant. What about arc secant of 2? Arc secant of 2 means secant is 2, second value is 2, or the cosine value is 1/2. Yan. So parang yung kanina sa number 1, if cosine value is 1/2, that means 60 degrees. We want a 60-degree angle, or equivalently, this is pi over 3. What about arc cotangent of negative square root of 3 over 3? Yan, arc cotangent of that. So that means cotangent theta is negative 1 over square root of 3. Diba? That is the unsimplified version of this one. Okay? So that means cosine. The numerator of cotangent is cosine. No? So cosine value is 1/2. Sin theta is square root of 3 over 2. Which one is positive? Which one is negative? Remember the arc cotangent, saan siya nagre-range? Parang sa dito, no? Ay, sorry, dito pala, no? Ang iniskipan niya lang is the 90 degrees. No, not this part, okay? So 0 to 180. Okay? So it's either on the first or second quadrant. Okay, so that means si sine yung positive, si cosine yung negative. Okay, kasi cotangent is negative. Okay, so when is cosine negative 1/2? Pagka, dapat 60 degrees, no? Kapag ka positive. Okay, pero dito sa second quadrant, ano yung counterpart ng 60 degrees? That will be 120 degrees, the supplementary angle of 60 degrees, or equivalently, that will be 2 pi over 3. Okay, you can pause this video if you still want to absorb. Parang yung knowledge din po natin ng reference angles, no? Tinetrain tayo, no? Pag nasa second quadrant, kinukuha natin yung supplementary angle. Kasi 'di ba, ang reference angle lang natin is the one made with the positive with the x-axis, pero ang kailangan natin is this angle here. Yun yung ating ang reference kasi natin sa trigo na angles yung ating initial side, the positive x-axis. Okay, so ayun po, now let's have the number 6. This is the last one. If the arc cosecant is negative 1, that means sine value is negative 1, the reciprocal, no? So that happens, di ba, ang sine natin nandito pag ganun, no? Parang sa arc sine. So kung negative 1, that means we're taking this value over here, which is negative 90 degrees. Or negative pi over 2. Okay, so that's it. I hope you are learning or you're getting the idea of how we're getting the inverse trigonometric values or trigonometric function values. We're getting the angle given the value of the trigonometric function. Okay. Now, how do we solve trigonometric equations? Okay. Mag-solve tayo ng mga trigonometric equations. May mga prerequisite knowledge dito. We should know how to solve linear and quadratic equations. Dapat marunong din tayo mag-factor ng quadratic equations. And of course, dapat alam natin yung mga special and quadrantal angles, Tsaka syempre, added advantage if you are very skillful in using your reference angles. Okay? Yan. Para kung nagtitipid ka sa paggamit ng calculator. Although sasabihin ng iba, pwede naman mag-calculator. Now, let's have 2 sin x equals 1. Pang-check natin yung calculator natin sa ating final answer. Okay? So, what we can do here is to divide both sides by 2. Okay, so we have that. After dividing by 2, we can apply the arcsine function on both sides. Yan. So, that means ang x natin is, ang sin x equals 1/2. So, that means nasa first quadrant tayo. So, ang answer natin is pi over 6. Pero since we're given with this equation, we know it's not only pi over 6 that will satisfy the equation, kundi pati yung mga coterminal ni pi over 6, only 30 degrees. So, we can include the plus 2k pi to take care of the coterminal angles. Okay? Of pi over 6. Kasi, di ba, nandito yung pi over 6, every time you go back to that, you return to the same value. Okay? Pero it's not only pi over 6 that will satisfy the equation. Remember, gusto natin nagsasatisfy ng equation. Okay? So, dito nalilimit tayo sa maraming value. Hindi tayo nalilimit sa restricted values lang. There are several values that can satisfy the equation. So, aside from pi over 6, meron din tayo dito sa kabila, no? Sa second quadrant where sin x is 1/2 and that is 5 pi over 6, di ba? 5 pi over 6, pati yung coterminal ng 5 pi over 6. So, we have the plus 2k pi, di ba? This is 1. Even multiple of pi is another complete revolution. Say from this point, balik, 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 di ba? So, ayun, those values, maraming values of x will satisfy the equation. So, in degrees, no, this is what? Pwede nating sabihin 30 degrees. Let's write it here. We can have 30 degrees plus even multiple of 360 degrees. 2 pi is 360 degrees. As long as k is an integer pala. K is any integer kasi 360 na po, no? Kanina even multiple of pi. Okay. So ito namang 5 pi over 6, what is that in degrees? That will be 180 minus 30, kaya 150 degrees, supplementary ni 30, plus an integral multiple of 360. O itry natin sa calculator, 2 times sine of 30 equals 1. Kunwari, 390, di ba? When k is equal to 1 here, 390, 2 times sine 390 equal pa rin sa 1. Kunwari, dito naman, say k is equal to 4. So, that will be 720 times 2. That will be 1440 plus 150. 1,590 degrees. Kahit input natin 2 times sine of 1,590 degrees, yan, that will be equal pa rin sa 1. Okay? So, ayun, marami tayong values. We can check the answer or answers by substituting to the original equation. Now, what about in here? We have sine x plus square root of 2 equal to negative sine x. So, just like in solving for a linear equation, di ba, ang ginagawa natin is to combine the terms with variables. So, we move this term to the other side. So, we make it positive. Now, this one, moving it to the other side, that becomes negative. Okay? We can combine these two. They are similar terms. So, that will be 2 sine x equal to negative square root of 2. And again, if we divide both sides by 2, we arrive at this. Okay? So, pwede nating isipin when is sine x equal to negative square root of 2 over 2. We're thinking of 45 degrees as our reference angle. Pero negative, no? So, saan siya negative? Yung sine value sa third tsaka sa fourth quadrant. So, sa third quadrant, ang equivalent ni 45 degrees or pi over 4 is 5 pi over 4. Kasi from pi, mag-a-add ka pa clockwise eh, no? Mag-a-add ka ng pi over 4 to go to the third quadrant. Okay? Pagka papuntang second quadrant, pa-subtract. Kasi pa-counterclockwise. So, Pa-add tayo ng pi over 4. 5 pi over 4 plus 2k pi. Sa fourth quadrant naman, this is 2 pi. Para pakarating ka sa fourth quadrant, pa-subtract o pa-add. Should be pa-subtract kasi nagka-clockwise ka. No? So 2 pi minus pi over 4 will be 7 pi over 4 again plus 2k pi to take care of the coterminal angles. Okay, so in degrees, this will be what? 180 plus 45 is 225 degrees plus integral multiple of 360 degrees. Or dito naman 360 minus 45, that would be 315 degrees plus integral multiple of 360 degrees. Okay, now what about this equation? 2 sine squared x minus sine x minus 1 equals 0. Yan. Remember, meron tayong naka-quadratic, no? So we can let that be equal to a certain variable v. This is quadratic in terms of sign, no? So meron kang quadratic equation 2v squared minus v minus 1 equals 0. Okay, solve tayo ng quadratic equation. We can do factoring. Okay, so that means v equals negative 1/2 or v equals 1. Pero remember, our v is equal to sine x. Replace natin siya by sine x. So when is sine x equal to negative 1/2? We're thinking of 30 degrees or pi over 6. Okay. Pero dahil negative, dapat nasa third quadrant. So ang equivalent ng pi over 6, pi plus pi over 6 will be 7 pi over 6. Sa fourth quadrant naman, that will be 11 pi over 6. Again, meron tayong plus 2k pi kasi masasatisfy pa rin ng mga coterminal angles yung equation. Yun yung punto natin. Bakit natin sinasali yung plus 2k pi? Now, for the sine x being equal to 1, nandito lang tayo sa positive y-axis where x is 90 degrees or pi over 2. Again, we have the plus 2k pi to take care of the coterminal angles of pi over 2 or 90 degrees. So those are the solutions for this. Okay. Again, you can check your answers by substituting them to the original equation. Okay. Now, let's have our example 4. Ngayon, ni-restrict na tayo. Sabi dito sa problem, we are to find all the values of x on the interval. May particular interval lang tayo from 0 to 2 pi. Yan, para hindi na tayo magko-coterminal angles. Okay? Yan, satisfying this given equation. So, quadratic tayo in terms of second function. So, we will let the second, yung ating base, yung ating base or base variable, the second function is the v. Yan. So, ayun yung v natin. You can make use of other letters kung ayaw nyo ng v, pero you cannot make use of x kasi yung x mo represents the angle here. Baka malito tayo. Meron na kasing pinaggamitan ng x. Okay? So, wag naman puro x. Yan. Okay, so si v naman, no? So, v squared minus 3v plus 2 equals 0. Quadratic equation. Tintransform natin. Solving for this quadratic function, we have v minus 2, v minus 1. That's why it's very important that you are very skillful in your factoring. Okay? Kung medyo na-OC, pwede pong i-counter-check. No? Dapat negative 2, negative 1, negative 3. Negative 2 times negative 1, positive 2. Medyo na-OC lang and you want to double-check if your factors are correct. So that means v equals 2 and v equals 1 or v equals 1. So that means secant x is equal to 2 or secant x equals 1. Secant x equal to 2 means cosine is 1/2. So positive sa first tsaka sa fourth quadrant. So cosine 1/2, 60 degrees yung angle natin doon or pi over 3. Wala tayong plus 2k pi kasi maglalampas na tayo dun sa 2 pi, no? Okay? Hanggang 2 pi lang yung ating interval na given. Okay? So sa fourth quadrant naman, we have 5 pi over 3. Okay? So meron din tayo for secant x equal to 1 sa positive x-axis naman, 0. Okay? So ayun, other than that, meron pa ba? Ayun, wala na. So we have these three solutions. si pi over 3, si 5 pi over 3, and si 0. If you substitute each of this, yan, to the original function or equation, masasatisfy niya yung equation. Okay? Ayan, so that's for our example 4. Now, let's proceed to our example 5. Find all the values of t on 0 to 360 degrees. Again, nalilimit tayo sa ating values of the variable t this time, hindi na x, no? So, 0 to 360 degrees satisfying the given equation. So, that means ang answer natin must be given in degrees kasi yung ating interval is given in degrees. So, lipat muna natin yung 1. Let's isolate this is the term or the factor involving the trigonometric function cosine. So, i-isolate muna natin yung term na to. Okay? So, moving the negative 1 to the other side, it will become positive 1. We get rid of the coefficient first. So, dividing both sides by 2. Yan. Magka-cancel yung 2 doon. So, cosine of 3t is equal to 1/2. Okay? Now, we don't divide by 3 on both sides kasi we're referring to the angle, no? So, yung 3t yung consideration natin. This is our theta. Okay? So, parang let's imagine cosine of theta being equal to 1/2. So, na-mention na natin yun, no? That means the theta value should be equal to 60 degrees, no? So, 60 degrees sa first quadrant. Pero aside from that, sa fourth quadrant din, no? Pero remember, yung theta na yon, let theta be equal to 3t, no? That is your 3t. So, kung 60 degrees siya, yan, nilagyan lang natin ng k 360 degrees kasi titingnan natin kung saan aabot yung ating t value kung hanggang 360 degrees lang. Okay? So, dividing both sides by 3, kasi para ma-solve natin yung variable t, this will become 20 degrees. Okay? Pero kapag ka nag-add tayo ng 360, diba? 360 plus 60, that will be 420 degrees. 420 degrees, if this is your 3t, this is when k is equal to 1. Okay. That means t is equal to 140 degrees. Pasok pa rin siya dun sa interval na to na hanggang 360 degrees, okay pa din siya. What about when k is equal to 2? When k is equal to 2, this factor is 720 plus 60, that will be 780. So, 780 degrees yung 3t natin. So, if we divide both sides by 3, t 780 divided by 3 will be equal to 260 degrees. Pasok pa din dun sa interval. Okay? Diba? So, you notice this as a pattern. 20, 140, 260. They differ by, parang sa arithmetic progression natin, 120 degrees. And you notice yung 120 degrees na yun is actually 360 degrees divided by 3. Okay? So, parang once you know the 60 degrees divided by 3 na 20 degrees, you can just add the 120 degrees. Ngayon, pag nag-add tayo dito na 120 degrees, that will be 380 degrees already. Lalampas na siya dun sa ating range. Although 380 degrees will still satisfy the equation if you use your calculator. Kaya lang sa problem natin, between 0 and 360 lang ang hinahanap. So, we're restricted to the values of t equal to 20 degrees, 140, and 260 degrees. Okay. So, let's have ayun yung sa fourth quadrant. What about sa fourth quadrant? Meron pa nga pala, no? Kasi 60 degrees is only for the first quadrant. Sa fourth quadrant, meron din, no? Pwedeng 300 degrees nga pala yung ating theta. So, pag nag-divide tayo, try na natin yung shortcut natin. The t is 100 degrees, diba? Dividing it by 3. Tapos mag-a-add na lang tayo ng 120. Sabi natin yung shortcut, no? Kasi that's 360 divide by 3. If you divide both sides by 3, diba? Parang it's k times 120 degrees. So, 220 yung kasunod. Tapos, we have 340 degrees. Pag nag-add pa tayo ng 120, lalampas na tayo. So, again, these are the next or the other set of values of t satisfying the equation and at the same time on this interval. They are on this interval. Okay, so 6 na values of t. Yung answer natin, no? 20, 140, 260, 100, 220, and 340. Yun. Okay, what about this? Number 6, no? Find the value of x. Same interval, 0 to 360. Take note na yung 360, hindi na natin in-include kasi coterminal naman siya with the 0. Okay? So parang bumalik na lang kasi siya, no? So ang ating equation is cosine squared x minus sine x minus 1 equals 0. Yan. This time we have a slight problem kasi yung ating trigo functions are not the same. This is cosine and sine. So we cannot do the usual thing that we did in the previous examples na nagle-let v tayo na sine x and then that's it, no? Meron kang v squared minus b minus 1 kasi if you let this be equal to v, this is not your v squared. So mali po yun, okay? So kung ito yung ating v, dapat sine squared yung nandito, okay? So what we will do with this one is to write cosine squared in terms of the sine squared and that will be 1 minus sine squared x. Okay, so ang lalabas niyan, we have, ayan, pwede nating i-cancel yung 1 minus 1. Tapos, ayan na lang matitira. Okay? Pwede pa tayo mag-multiply both sides by negative 1. So, sine squared x plus sine x equals 0. Ayan, pwede tayong mag-factoring. Common factor si sine x. Ilabas si sine x, so we have sine x times sine x plus 1 equals 0. Hindi na tayo dumaan dun sa v squared plus v thing, no? Inano na natin, medyo fast forward na, no? So this product is 0 if this is 0 and or this is 0, diba? Kasi, diba? Yun yung parang kaya yung sa quadratic equation, if you're solving for the zeros of that, ini-equate natin yun sa 0, okay? So sine x is 0 or sine x plus 1 equals 0. Sine x is negative 1 in that case. So if sine x equals 0, that means x equals where? Nandito o di ka nandun. No? So 0 tsaka 180 degrees. Yan. Tapos kapag negative 1, nandun ka sa 270 degrees. So you have 0, 180, and 270 degrees for your answer. Okay? Ayun, and that's it. Yun na yung ating tatlong values of x on this interval satisfying the given equation. Now, what about for example 7? Let's find the value of x pa rin on the given interval satisfying this given equation. Same as what we did in example 7, we will try to express this in terms of tangent squared. Kasi it's easier to express this in terms of tangent squared than to express this in terms of secant. Kasi yung Pythagorean identity natin, may kinalaman sa mga squared versions ni secant squared and tangent squared. Okay? So, mas madaling express to papunta kay tangent squared kesa ito papunta kay secant. So, si tangent squared ang gagamitin natin. What is secant squared? In terms of tangent squared, it will be 1 plus tangent squared x. Okay? Tapos, meron ka pa rin minus 2 tangent x minus 4 equals 0. And then, we can simplify the constants. 1 minus 4 is negative 3. So, meron kang, kung dadaan tayo sa quadratic equation, v squared minus 2v minus 3 equals 0. Okay? So, pwede na nating i-factor yon. Parang lalabas, you have v minus 3, v plus 1. Okay? Pero diniretso na natin, no? Kunwari, sanay na tayo gumamit ng quadratic na merong trigo function. Okay, so ayun yung tangent of x minus 3 times tangent of x plus 1. Again, you can double check. Negative 3, positive 1 is negative 2. Negative 3 times positive 1 is negative 3. Okay, so here we have tangent of x equals 3. Here we have tangent of x equals negative 1. Okay, so ang lalabas niyan, tangent x equals 3, is that possible? Where? Arctan of 3, is that possible? Dito siya sa first quadrant, kasi positive, no? Pwede rin siya sa third quadrant, positive pa rin, no? So ano yung ating mga values? Hindi ganun ka-special. So using our calculator, that would be 71.57 for the first quadrant. Yung counterpart niya, ito lang ang ibibigay ni calculator, the principal value, kasi siya lang yung nandun. Pero, remember, kailangan natin yung counterpart sa third quadrant. So, 180 plus that 71.57 will be 251.57 degrees. Kaya dapat hindi tayo dependent sa calculator kasi the calculator will only display this. Okay? Not this one. So what about tangent x equal to -1? Sa nagne-negative 1? Dito sa second quadrant, negative, tsaka sa fourth quadrant. So maa-associate natin siya sa 45 degrees pero dahil nasa second quadrant, 180 minus 45 is 135 degrees. Sa fourth quadrant, 315 degrees. So itong mga angles na to, sila yung values of x on this interval satisfying this given equation. Again, you can always pause this video if you want to absorb our discussion. Now let's go to our time for questions, beginning with question number 1. You can pause the video if you want to have more time answering. I strongly encourage you to answer with me. Yan, sagutin niyo po. Kasabay ko. If f of x is equal to r cosine of x, what is f of 1 minus f of 0 in degrees? Okay, medyo fast forward ko po yung timer natin. So yung f of 1, substituting x to our 1 is r cosine of 1. Yung f of 0 is r cosine of 0. Okay? R cosine of 1 is equal to what? This is equal to, nagre-range siya sa 0 to 180. So this is 0. Okay. Tapos yung ating f of 0, r cosine of 0. Remember yung r cosine values, dito siya sa interval na to. 0 to 180. So r cosine of 0 naman, nandito siya sa 90 degrees. So if we are to subtract this, f of 1 minus f of 0 is negative 90 degrees. This is our answer. Okay, I hope you got that one correctly. Now let's go to question number 2. Find all the values of x on the interval 0 to 360 satisfying the equation cosine x equals -1. Okay, fast forwarding our timer. Ayan, so cosine x equals -1. Ibig sabihin, kung -1 siya, tapos remember we're solving for the values of x on this equation, ibig sabihin nandito siya saan? Negative no? Nandito siya sa 180 degrees. Okay? Ayan. So aside from that, wala na po, no? So that means our x value is just 180 degrees. Okay? Kasi coterminal na yung kasunod. After this, wala nang iba. Quadrantal angle kasi siya. Okay, that's for our question number 2. Now, let's have question number 3. Find all the values of x on the interval 0, 360 satisfying this equation. Okay, fast forwarding our timer. Ayan, so ito, tsaka ito, pwedeng i-combine. So, magiging negative secant x. And our constant naman, 1 plus 1 will be equal to 2. So, that means secant x equals -2. Okay, so kung -2 yung secant, ibig sabihin, yung cosine x is -1/2. Okay, so pwedeng tingnan mo sa calculator pero isa lang yung ibibigay na answer ni calculator, yung nandito sa second quadrant. Pero remember sa third quadrant, negative din yung cosine. So associated reference angle for 1/2 is 60 degrees. Okay? Pero dito sa second quadrant, 120 degrees, no? So, our answer will be 120 degrees. 120 degrees. Yun yung bibigay actually lang ng calculator. Pero sa third quadrant, from 180 plus 60, si 240 degrees din will also satisfy the given equation. So, ito yung ating values of x that on this interval, 0, 360, satisfying this given equation. Okay. Now, what about question number 4? Let's find all the values of x on this same interval satisfying the equation cosine squared x equals cosine x. Okay, fast forwarding our timer, we have the following. Ayan, so ang solution natin magiging quadratic to, no? So cosine squared x minus cosine x equals 0. Okay? So factoring our cosine x minus 1. So this is 0 if this factor is 0 or this factor is 0. So that means cosine of x equals 1. Okay. So cosine x equals 0, ibig sabihin it's either here or here. Diba? It's the x-coordinate of the terminal point. So nandun siya sa y-axis. So 0 and 90 degrees and 270 degrees. So for our x, nakakadalawa na tayo dito, 90 degrees tsaka 270 degrees. Pasok sa interval. What about cosine x equals 1? Dito naman sa positive x-axis. So that will be 0 degrees. Pasok pa rin sa ating interval. Sorry. Ayun. So ito yung ating values of x on the interval satisfying the equation.